I met Alexandros through Exonera Design and Julie, and then we've seen each other again in one of the type Thursdays recently, and then I'm just picking up on that because it's very important to expose yourself in everything that's happening. So, for example, last night, I didn't know, he told me, it was the time before, 2 days ago, it was Italian graphic design in Bulgaria. So free event about graphic design and some really two well-known people talking about how graphic design has been established in certain areas in Italy, etc. So that was a free event. How do you find these events? You just go online, you type, and that's there, free. So I asked Alexandros to come and talk to you. Last year, Alexandros did some portfolio review for the second year students.
That's right, yeah.
Second or third? Third year.
Third year,
yeah. Portfolio surgery with quite a few members, other people from creative industries. Despite the fact that Alexandros, he looks quite young, he is as well. He is a junior designer at forpeople. It's a creative agency based in Oval. South SW9, SW9, near, not very far from the Tate Britain, that's location-wise. So he's a junior designer. He studied in Arts University Bournemouth, and he's working with forpeople for the last year and a half.
Yes.
So. And then I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, you pretty much said everything. But
okay, now you can go. Done. Right. I think we should welcome him because I think might be a bit stressful. So.
Thank you. This is the first one for me. So thank you, Anastasios, for the opportunity.
This is how we pronounce my name, by the way, if you notice.
I'm going to start a timer, so I know I'm not running out. I'm not running late. The way I've kind of set up this presentation is a little bit like a sketchbook. It's the way I would answer this if this was a brief when I was back at uni. So it could be, you know, bits and pieces, but hopefully they kind of like spark a thought in your head or they resonate with you. And I imagine Anastasios is probably such a this subject proves how tough of a teacher he must be, because it is a challenging thing to talk about. Coming out straight out of university, like not a lot of the work that I've done or I am doing at the moment is kind of like resonates with these two words, which are quite big words for design, but I think there is a really good way to discuss this topic. So with the first image, I'm sure like most of you are keeping up with politics and what's happening around, but I was just reading the news and you know, there was this image and you can kind of see at the top right there is, you know, those two banners there, they say the beauty of the world lies in the diversity of its people, strength lies in differences, not in similarities. Like, this is such a current topic. But to bring it back to design, there's many ways you can talk about it. So I'm going to really quickly introduce myself through my work and tell you what I did in my last year. And this kind of philosophy that really stuck with me, listening to people like Michael Beirut from Pentagram, who was speaking in London in September. So this idea of like design being an input and output process. So the more diverse your input, the more diverse your output is going to be. So you can pull inspiration from anything you kind of are interested or looking into. And this is something really cool that I find about design, because you're always learning. It's always about something else that you're doing through design, and that's a great opportunity to grow as a person, but also as a professional. And there's a really lovely quote by Maria Popova. I don't know if you know her, but she runs a really awesome blog called Brain Pickings, and you should definitely look it up. And she's a writer. She's written for like Wired magazine and other big publications, and the blog that she runs like has everything from philosophy to poetry to design to everything like that. So yeah, she says, in order for us to truly create and contribute to the world, we have to be able to connect the dots, right? And this idea of like building things and recombine these pieces to build new ideas. So you have to think of it as kind of Legos. You know, these bricks that we have are, if you have like just one shape or one size or one color, you kind of limit yourself. So again, the richer and more diverse that pool of resources you have, that mental library, the easier it will be for you to create something diverse and unique and something that feels right. So this kind of thing like explains, it's more like an introduction to one of the projects that I did back at university. It was a brief, I don't know if you guys know about competition briefs like the International Society of Typographic Designers. It was a brief about celebrating the life and work of Adrian Frutiger, one of the most incredible typographers of our times. I mean, he recently passed away, and that was the brief. That was the reason why we did the brief. So it was to design a publication that is aimed towards graphic designers, people like you and me, and especially like more established people who are really familiar with his work. So that's quite a challenge because there's already so much about him out there. So I really kind of set myself a task of how I can make it different, how I can make that unique. So I did a bunch of research and looked at documentaries, books, and things like that, and that just kind of stuck it all up on the wall and kept reading and reading and reading and asking questions of how I can interpret the brief in a unique way. That also kind of resonates with who Adrian Frutiger was. And I was carrying this massive book with me throughout probably like 6 months. I could barely fit it in my bag, and it's an incredible book. You should definitely, if you haven't come across it yet, you should definitely pick it up and read about it. There's so much information in there about typeface, typography, and everything around it. And this kind of proves like, why would you design a book by Adrian Frutiger that this like already celebrates his life and work? So how can you make it? I was just like, how can I make this special? So back from the mind map, there was just this one thing that stuck with me, this grid that he designed for the typeface universe, and I was like, this is really cool. Like no other typefaces kind of had that back in those days. So I just kept looking at it, and I had this question in my head, like, what happens if you fold this grid down, and what happens like if you create something three-dimensional with it? So I did. So I literally printed it out on an A4 sheet and cut it up, and then started folding it. And it turns out you actually can fold it down to that structure there on the left. So that's about this big. It's really small. And then you can see how I progressed and try to create something that felt a little bit more like a book. And I made about like this. These are all the mock-ups I made. This is how I progressed throughout. I just kept printing and printing and printing and making until I felt it was right, because there were loads of technical difficulties for it. And then, yeah, I actually did it. I finished it, and I called it The Birth of the Universe. And it's like a really simple idea. Mostly his work was black and white, so there was a little bit of color exploration through other pieces of his work. So it was a tonality that I wanted to bring here. And this is what it looks like when you fold it. Like this is the finished piece, and it's about this big. It's like an A0 print folded down, and yeah, it was a really tricky thing to figure out how you can make it work, and then also make sense when like someone is interacting with it. So, because it's at the end of the day, it is actually a book, and it had these two sides. So the back was black and white, and the front was again black and white, but it had these kind of colors, which were obviously taken from the grid. And it just basically explains how the typeface universe came to be, how it was designed, how it happened, but it uses the grid as its kind of like, as a way to celebrate itself. And I made a little video. It was a really difficult thing to make, but I was really pleased with myself how I managed to actually, technically produce this. This is the time lapse of like 10 seconds, but actually to make this thing took me each time it would take me about 45 minutes to cut the whole thing and fold it. And there was like special ways you could. I learned from someone that if you take a ballpoint pen and you take out the ink, and then you just have the edge of it, the tip of it, it's actually better to crease the paper than having the bone or the book bone. So there's little things like that which were really cool to learn through the process. And again, it is something. Hopefully, the way I interpreted the brief was through a diverse, a different way of looking at things. And another thing, really quickly, was kind of progressing, from that our graduation show, which was literally about this idea of how each of us, and it's the same for you guys, like every one of us is different, so every one of us is nothing like the other person, and perhaps all the work that you do is not always like different to every project that you do. So we called it Nothing Like because it was we thought it was about being a celebration of diversity. So sometimes the work that we produce, it's actually nothing like graphic design, and that's really interesting in itself. So each student is nothing like the other, and each project is nothing like the next. And I can explain to you. We have this really cool video. So we felt that phrase kind of resonated really well with us because you could use it in an informal way, like, nothing like a fresh pint or something like that. So it's about those kind of informal moments that are true and honest, but also you can bring it into your work, and it's about this idea of different projects every time, and people kind of bringing in their own perspective. So and to prove this, it was just everyone had such incredible outcomes from their final major projects. Someone made cones, created different things, like 3D printed stuff, packaging, books, and I think that's the beauty of a course in design, and especially graphic design, that kind of gives you that freedom. And it's always about graphic design and something else. It's never about the kind of technique or the skill. It's always about the subject and the topic. So we had people kind of creating interactive installations and ideas about flirting with failure and what failure meant. And there was a really beautiful quote by our course leader, which kind of defines this idea of the process of the designer, kind of again feeding his brain with things and then magically kind of arriving at a solution, at an outcome, which it could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have a form when you sort of start thinking about it, but through the process guides you to create something unique and something that feels relevant to everything that you create every time. And then that was the kind of end of the university. So as Anastasia said, I came here to London and found myself in D&D, and then I met these guys from forpeople Studio. So I even wrote my dissertation on multidisciplinary kind of ideas, and this forpeople are a multidisciplinary studio, and I feel like I always wanted to work in a place like that. Yeah, so what's really nice about this this studio is that, as I say, it is a multidisciplinary studio, and these are the four kind of like categories of teams that we have. And this is really important because you're never working on a project with like just graphic designers or people in product design. There's always a mix of teams, so there's always that opportunity to learn from somebody else. And the way the guys do it is, or they've set it up, is there's a vision and strategy team and what we call CMF, and I'm going to explain that afterwards. And then we've got people in interior and 3D and product, then graphics and digital, which is the team I work in, and then moving image, so that covers photography and filmmaking. And everything that kind of we do, as you saw, there's like a lot of product design, but there's a lot of kind of branding projects as well. So everything that we kind of do is always considering every aspect of design, not necessarily just one specific thing. So, and that's a really unique opportunity to have everything under one roof. So 100 people from different disciplines collaborating together. And an example to kind of give you why this was really important for me when I was just straight out of university was, so let's say you have kind of, you know, this terminology like branding, and we identify it as something that is a business idea that someone wants to bring to life. It could be a product, could be a service, could be anything. And at least at university, I thought it was mostly, you know, like digital and print, and that was kind of it. But when I went to forpeople, it was this idea of like another area, the CMF. So CMF stands for color, material, and finish. So that has to do a lot of like materiality of products, or it could be materials in print, or you know, paper, and finishes like foiling or anything else. And the way we do this is we have people from like textiles or other kind of disciplines where they have this, they're very keen on like researching the latest materials that are out there so that we can use them in our processes. And this is our CMF library, so we have a library full of like textiles, I don't know, different products, and we use this for our client work and everything that we do. Create like mood boards, and it's not just about a printed mood board, it's a physical mood board. So when you create perhaps a brand identity, and you kind of show them as well, like what could the interior of a place look like, or how does the print, the thing that you've kind of designed the print sit next to the interior, and you've like got samples of walls or carpets or fabrics that go on chairs. So the girl on the left is Caroline, and she has joined us from Foster's and Partners, an architecture firm, quite recently. And one of her roles is to kind of like send out this newsletter with materials and things that come out. So, you know, if you follow blogs like Design or other kind of design blogs which are keeping really up to date, what they do is they always releasing, you know, something that's cool that you can use as part of your project and in this industry. There's everything from, you know, recycled paper cups from G.F. Smith, which is a really cool project that they've been recently involved in. And it's about maybe like packaging and graphics and what the finishes, you know, how can we do canned finishes or compostable films, and I think this is really important because these are kind of inclusive decisions that you can make. You know, you can kind of start deciding that whatever you're designing and you're making is not just going to be thrown away and that's the end of the life of that product. You have to consider as a responsibility of the designer that everything kind of is circular and goes around. So we ask ourselves a lot about, you know, not just about how something physically looks, but also how it makes you feel, how do you interact with it. So there's a lot of like work on user experience, which is in itself a very inclusive process to understand who you're designing for, the audience that you're designing for. And an example to kind of show you this, it's this recent rebrand. I don't know if you've seen, this is not our work, by the way. I'm just showing you, because I cannot show you the work that we do besides the showreel. This is just to explain like this idea of like color, material, and finish and how that relates to branding. So the fans are recently rebranded. It was a very soft rebrand, so there's not much change, but from the livery to some other elements like digital touch points and physical touch points and typography and color. But I found this one image which really explains how CMF works. Like, this is literally what we do when we create these kind of mood boards for the clients. And it's really important to see, you know, like, what is that logo that you're designing, what does it look like in a physical way, you know, besides pixels, and how does it look like on a fabric, and how can you print it, and if in this case where it's a plane and there's like interiors, you can kind of start building these palettes. So it's not just about a color palette that relates to the brand identity, but then it's also like a material palette, which is part of the brand assets. So yeah, design is more than a color, shape, or typeface. It's a powerful tool that mediates our relationship with the world and has the power to connect people, you know. A very good example is in this city, the London wayfinding system, you know, is an amazing piece of design, and it's very inclusive. And actually, one of my colleagues has worked on this project. It's one of the first jobs that he had in London. So he was explaining to me about how there was all this research that went into this project, and you kind of see it, some of it here. It's actually all available on the internet as well. I recommend kind of really looking into this, because it's a really good way of how you can do first-hand research, which is something we definitely do when we're at uni, the primary research, and how that informs every decision that you take. So yeah, good design is inclusive design. For design to be inclusive, it must take into consideration its audience and the user experience. You have to think about the incredible amount of detail that went into this project, where, you know, you're not just designing a map that you can kind of unfold, but you're designing a 3D map, and then how does that relate to the physical world, and how do people navigate a city? Because essentially what we've designed is we've actually designed cities which are, the more people we have, the more complex they are. So we actually have to work backwards now to solve that complexity. We have to simplify the things that we've created. And that's what design does a lot of the time, right? It kind of aims, it aspires to simplify things and make them better. So yeah, design is for people, and that's, you know, everyone kind of knows that. The more you understand your audience, the better your product can be. And that's me, and with my grandma. I'm showing this because I'm sure, like, you guys have a close relationship with your parents, but I like to Skype my grandma on the weekends. And actually, she can handle Skype. She's 80 years old, and that's really cool because, you know, don't have to be there, but I can still keep in touch. And it's quite amazing that she can deal with a laptop and use like an interface that can sometimes be complex, but still make a phone call. And a really cool project that has been done quite recently is by Fuse Project. It's a design studio in America, in the US, in California, I believe. And this is LEQ. It's like an active aging companion. So it's a little bit like an AI, but it's about this idea of kind of having, you know, people being lonely, and especially like designed for the aging population. So I've got a really like quick 1-minute video that explains.
Mary, Megan sent a new photo. Would you like to look at it?
Yes, please. Oh, he's a gem.
Would you like to respond to Megan's post?
Sure. LEQ reminds me to take my meds, arranges rides for me. She even reminds me of all my appointments.
Mary, don't forget bridge with the Golden Girls at 1 p.m. Would you like to practice?
No, I don't need that.
I didn't catch that. Do you want to play bridge or not?
Oh, fine. Let's play.
Yeah, you get the idea. It's when I saw that project, it really got me thinking about how are we kind of figuring out solutions for people when they're aging and stuff like that. Because whenever I go home, I actually always have to fix something for my grandma's laptop because there's always something broken, but actually turns out it isn't. So how can you simplify ways that people can interact with each other, no matter where they are or what their age is or what they do? So the Fuse project has a really kind of good idea, like this is or manifesto, like their philosophy. This idea of life brings stories to design, and design brings stories to life. So again, it's this about like looking around you and kind of looking at closely for not just problems but things that can kind of inspire something that you can design. And these are things that you guys know already. And something I was reading again the news recently at the New York Times, and there is a really cool exhibition currently in the US, and it is all about like inclusivity and diversity again in design. And there's really cool examples from again there's like the Fuse project that up there that was recently exhibited, and then the Nike Fly Ease, the shoe. So yeah, part of the article was saying, this exhibition makes plain why design matters. Constant was a generational change of thinking, not just about designing for difference, but about diversity and inclusion. And it's really amazing to see things like that happening, because it's kind of democratizing design. It's opening it up to people who are not designers. It's also like that exhibition that was at the Welcome Collection in London, and it was about can graphic, I don't know if you guys went to it, but can graphic design save your life? It's kind of opening those questions to a wider audience so that people understand how design relates to everyday life, not just business. And yeah, like look at Nike, how it kind of has evolved from a brand that was sort of in the background, just kept making a product, and then it's actually responding to the people that want to use its products. With the Fly Ease, which is the kind of it's an easier shoe to wear, and very recently with the Nike hijab, which is actually exhibited at the Design Museum. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's that kind of response to the times of now. Like always, design is part of the now. It's never kind of before or after. It's always thinking ahead, and it's always responding to things. And another awesome project, which is Emeco and Coca-Cola collaborated on. I don't know if you're familiar with Emeco, but they designed this iconic chair, which was used in the American submarines because of it was like made out of aluminium. It was really lightweight and really sturdy. So they approached Coca-Cola, or Coca-Cola approached them, and they kind of figured out an idea where they can use 111 bottles of Coca-Cola and create this chair. And why not? And then these are some products from this design studio called Pentatonic, which actually recently showed some of their work in this Somerset House in London. And it was a really nice exhibition. It was part of the London Design Festival, but the second one is recycled screens from phones, so making glassware and making products. And then the third one is recycled rice waste, actually. So it's just looking around and kind of seeing potential for design. So design can reach its full potential through a symbiosis of its disciplines. So creating that harmonious relationship with people from different backgrounds and different cultures, different skills, can help us excel the results of design. And I think the point is to always design holistically and not in isolation. And it kind of proved, like very recently with just what's going around in the world, there's always you see that now we're designing systems, not just a one-off thing. It's not just about one business that kind of like your corner coffee shop that needs a logo or branding, you know. And that's really interesting how we can work with people that have big ideas and create something that perhaps can adapt or change our world. And to finish off, there is an image which Anastasios asked me to kind of find to put in this topic of the presentation. And this is actually one of the images that I came across in the Adrian Frutiger book, and the Adrian Frutiger project. And it really shows you a timeline of how things have progressed. You know, from ancient times, and obviously here it does it through typography, but it that also relates to a more general perspective to design. And then you kind of have this in the end, you know, the question mark of, you could probably say, this is happening right now, you know, Elon Musk's like heavy Falcon, whatever, that thing is happening right now. So it's like he wants to put people on Mars, and then you got people designing spacesuits for Mars, and there's these things that are happening, and I think it's a really exciting time to be training in a profession, to become, you know, part of this industry, which is so active in its kind of environment. So yeah, I just want to finish off with that. I think it's quite a good metaphor.
I don't know, guys, how you find it overall. It's from too much information, I think, for 35-40 minutes.
I tend to do that, so yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, it was good. I think that they can follow. I have a couple of questions, right? And then we can ask the crowd if they would like to pick up on things.
Yeah.
You started by saying this subject, I'm not going to say exactly the sentence you said, but you said that this subject in particular, it shows the diversity and inclusivity. It is a very challenging subject.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell me from your experience in a year and a half now in Foreplay, that's your first job after you graduated.
Yeah.
And you are working in the studio with 100 people.
Yeah.
And you are collaborating with especially people from outside Europe for a number of projects.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
So tell me a bit more about that. Tell me about how this diversity and inclusivity, why is it a challenging subject? Why now we are looking opportunities outside our comfort zone, and how us as designers, how us as designers we adopt new habits, or we survive in new areas.
Yeah, it is challenging because a lot of the projects that we've been working on are not always straight. Like when you read the brief, there's not always that kind of consideration of diversity or inclusivity necessarily, but it's your responsibility as a designer to always steer the client and people towards that. I think design has that power to activate or give someone an incentive to do something in a better way or to do good. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and you saw some of the work that we do. One of our clients is Coca-Cola, but a lot of the work that we do is we challenge the way they think about their product, and we always try and push what they come to us with, and then also our own ways of responding to things, and that's why we have to keep learning, and that's why we have to keep ourselves up to date with things, and have people that are interested in different areas to kind of all put in this one pile as one source of material. And we always openly share our work with each other. So every Wednesday we'll have catch-ups and talk about projects and what everyone's been doing. And then if there is a similar project, we'll kind of share the resources and ways of thinking. And yeah, I think that's one part. Perhaps there is another part in your question.
Yeah, well, diversity across, why we need to expose as designers to this kind of environment, or why you think that's important for us to look a bit outside the comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Because I think that overall as designers, we are confident in front of the computer.
Yes.
We feel very confident, like sitting down, exploring things on our own.
Mhm.
But why we shouldn't do that, from your own perspective?
Yeah, because I think it's easy to just kind of, it's like speaking a language, you know, speaking that language like over and over again, and perhaps you sort of repeat the same things, or I'm trying to find an analogy like of something that you repeat, but I think the solutions kind of always sit outside the borders. Like, for some reason it seems like you can merge ideas and merge things together, because it's also about unusual ways of looking at the world, or maybe our vision becomes saturated sometimes as well, or maybe it's like about how you watch television, you know, and you sort of staring at a screen, the same way we stare at computers, and we just kind of forget about, or we think in a linear way, but perhaps escaping from that linear way is what gives us that flexibility in thinking, and then that perhaps that excitement as well. So how you can kind of, that idea might spark in your head by going through a different route.
When I asked Alexandros to send me a brief description of the presentation today and a brief bio, I forward to David as he's doing the poster. So one of the things that he said first, that usually people will not say as often, is a Greek-born London-based graphic designer. I would like to hear a bit. We have half the group, I assume, that here is from all over the world. And what's your perspective and your understanding? You coming from another country here, and how do you perceive the world?
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking a lot. I think I perceive the world as a sort of citizen of the world. Like, although I did say, now that you said that, I said you know, Greek, London-based graphic designer. It's a bit weird, but I sort of looked at how people write these bios, and that's how I wrote it.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't necessarily kind of relate to one identity. You know, I don't hold too closely to it, because I think, again, there's so many different cultures, and of course it's the way we are defined, but I think it's also, we should not forget that we're all like part of the human race, and that's kind of what...
Us as designers though, the question, okay, I do understand this, and I would definitely support that, especially me, but I would say that as a designers, what is the importance, what do we learn by engaging with different cultures, this diverse environment, and this is what London is offering compared with other cities?
Yeah, sure.
So how do you think that as a designer you learn? What is that can change the way you think in London in near to Brexit era?
Yeah, I think perhaps it's about, you know, if you look at a history book and you were reading through that, you learn so much about civilizations and how they kind of grew, and the things that they used to create, perhaps, you know, like ancient technologies or something like that. So the things that they actually designed with, and that sort of all sits part of the history, and there's so much going on. And if you just kind of look up from one source, you might be missing out on something else that someone else has been doing better than you, or someone kind of has arrived at a point or at a better idea quicker than you have, because you might be, you know, we might be designing it for like the same thing, but it's about
how open-minded you might be.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing, but it just makes sense of the more, you know, the more you're aware of things, the more you feed into the brain, and you can make like connections easier than if you just lived within this wall, you know.
I will take you to the daily life, okay, of working in your office.
Yeah.
It's actually not far from where I live.
Yeah.
But I have to come once. So, what's the daily life in an office of a dating agency of 100 people?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the daily life?
Yeah. The reality is, a lot of the things are much simpler. It's not about these kind of big questions all the time. So you have to have projects that keep the studio going, and you have to do simple projects that are kind of, the simple tasks that you might be learning here as well. It can flex from designing, print collateral to being part of a conversation on a strategic level. So before you start a branding project, you might be looking at the sort of creative territories that you might be looking into, and how these territories might feed into essentially a visual identity. And that's the cool thing. Like, that's when you can. Well, first of all, that comes from previously is created from a brand strategic outcome. So there's already some kind of like outcome there, which you take on and you are inspired from. But it's also a way you can kind of take that and interpret it, and through a reanalysis of it, perhaps you see something that you think you might need tweaking, or you can add to it and make it even better, because there is it's a different stage of that progression of that idea, and that's the cool thing about collaboration, that you can kind of push it one thing this way and then someone else pushes it that way.
How does it work with crits? Like, how does it work with the pitching or presenting the work to the studio?
To the client?
To the client and to each other.
Yeah, it depends. A lot of the time, what I'll say with the client is very similar to what I showed you with some of the visuals, where it might be in our CMF library, and we might be sharing. We might first do a presentation, and then we might take them into the library and say, here's our mood boards, and here's like the materials that we envision that you could be using in your spaces, or on your print collateral, or on your products.
How important is punctuality in that? Like talking about the client,
yeah.
Right? Talking about the presentation.
Yeah.
I think that might be a good thing to discuss, like about how punctual you are as an office or as a person, or how professional you are when you're talking to this client.
Yeah, it's very important, and that's something you cannot really have when you're a student. So there's loads to learn once you progress from here to a place that hopefully can foster your talent and help you kind of grow. But it's very important to be professional. It's very important to understand the client, see the world from his eyes. Be kind of in their minds, because then they feel more comfortable with you. So what we do for people is, and that's why we don't show much on our websites, but it's all like kind of on the low key, is that more quiet relationship, like more private relationship with the people. That's what we want them to feel like. We're almost like their in-house design team. And I think that works clearly as a business model, but also as a way of, it's like we're their best friends in a way. We want them to trust us and then come back again and do another project. We always look for creating relationships than just one quick task that will give us some income.
Right. So, any questions from the crowd? Do you have anything to ask, Alexandros? Duarte.
Hi. So I don't want to come off as aggressive, but I kind of want to ask something like this. So when you work for a company such as Coca-Cola, who may be a bit controversial, like helping them sell more because they are cause of like diabetes and stuff like that, how do you weigh that personally? How do you take on a project like that, and does that affect your work that you produce?
Thanks for asking that question. It is a very important question to ask.
Hope it didn't turn.
No, of course not. It's funny because back at university I was like, there's no way, I would want to be working for a place that works for a client like that. But it's actually, do you know Bruce Mao? Do you know this Canadian graphic designer? You should definitely look him up. He's an amazing person. He talked about, I think someone asked him this question before, and what he said was like, you cannot just say, I'm not gonna work with these people because they're creating something and I think it's wrong and I'm just gonna leave them on their, you know, like continuing on that trajectory, which is negative. I feel confident that as a designer, I have the knowledge, or I will get the knowledge once I perhaps learn about them and what they actually want to achieve. Perhaps I'll have that opportunity to help them change something that they're like in their process or in their kind of actual brand or the product. So I think it's very important to not say no and say yes, and then like try and figure it out together. Is whoever created that brand was not this designer, it was just like clearly like a business idea, and it was
at the time,
yeah.
Now 100 years later, you have Neville Brody, he recreates the typeface.
Yeah. It's tricky because they will, at the end of the day, they will ask for some straightforward projects, you know, which are about branding and things like that, and you cannot say, oh, what if you did something else? You have to respond to the brief that you've been given. I mean, that kind of answers the question, but I can also say that's a lot of work that we cannot show. There's like internal stuff that, a lot of like progressive thinking that we're pushing them to change the ways about thinking things, and hopefully like some of those ideas will like live out in the world. And there's aspects of the brand that don't really do so much bad necessarily, and I think at the end of the day is a choice for the person, you know. You cannot. It's the same thing with like, I'm not going to say actually, I'm not going to say, I had a thought, I think it's a bit too much, but I'll save it for another day.
Do you have any other questions? Candice?
I really enjoyed your talk, especially when you were talking about design has the power to connect with people. And I believe that every designer should understand their audience before they design and not have that loophole. And I think I like that part, and I think all designers should actually know that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, it means a lot.
Any other questions?
Is that a selfie?
I just take pictures of myself, you know. I want to say something before I pass it the question to someone else, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned about a multicultural and multidisciplinary group.
Yeah.
For me, multidisciplinarity in design should be priority these days.
Yes.
When I grow up in an environment, as a designer grow up, I mean, where a designer will do everything. I will say I'm this kind of generation of people where the designer will do a bit of web, a bit of coding, a bit of printing, a bit of advertising, but branding and marketing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a society now where a designer, a graphic designer especially, will work on that aspect. Will be a graphic designer.
Yeah.
Will be the person that will understand certain values that you can input in teamwork, and then other people that come from different backgrounds. So I would like to know, like, I assume that you're working with animators, 3D visualizers, right? Okay. So now I think it's time to pass the to Jamila. She wants to ask something, right? She's a 3D animator.
Sweet.
Okay, sorry. With diversity, I like sometimes I believe they do leave people out in the sense of like disabled people, and I was thinking like in that community, because I'm doing research on that, they feel like they're left out all the time, even in media, like everything. And I hear people go on about diversity, but they do leave people out.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the world.
Always diversity to you.
Yeah, the world wasn't designed for disabled people, you know. Unfortunately, but that's our task to try and help people, or help mend or upgrade the world so that it works for people who are in that situation. And yeah, it's a huge subject, and a lot of that's a problem because
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
What?
About like leaving people outside, don't considering disabled people. Like I'm just thinking about landscape. I'm thinking about landscape architecture, for example. All these ramps that exist, especially in some countries that we park in front of them. We don't think about disabled people in wheelchairs.
Yeah, perhaps it's like the same way people don't remind themselves of how you can harm the environment or daily, you know. Perhaps people who do that maybe do that as well because they're not considerate enough. But did you mean that we leave people outside of the creative industry that are like the creative industry is not diverse enough? Is that?
Yeah, not diverse enough.
Yeah.
And even people who work for the companies, they don't really
There are two areas there I see myself. One is like there is not enough diversity within a creative agency nowadays, especially when it comes to disabled people or people with XYZ disability. But also I think that, and that's the reason of having this talk on specific subject, to understand us as creative people. How do we design? How do we consider people with specific disabilities? So, I don't know if you want to add something on this. There are two areas. Not enough disabled people within the creative industry for specific reasons, but I don't know if you have any in your design agency, or we don't think specific group when we design.
Yeah, I think that's a subject definitely of our times again. There was an article in Design about architecture and how it's not very diverse either. I went to a talk last year and Eric Spiegelman was there, and someone asked the question, because it was Eric Spiegelman, so it was graphic design and then architecture, and it was a little bit about like diversity and inclusivity again. And one of the guys from the audience asked the same question, and it is honestly, a big issue. And I think for me, as of now, I've arrived that perhaps the problem is in the education. So I think there's not much equality in education, perhaps. Especially the bigger the country is, the more difficult it is to manage such an important subject. I don't know. Yeah, what do you think about that being in the?
Well, I was just saying to a big group the last week, the week before, about what they need to take into consideration when they go somewhere. Like, it's not about ticking boxes, but I was talking in particular the role of women in creative industries. You don't see many, and there is a reason, which is part of the diverse kind of environment. So this needs to be changed. And I will give as an example, for example, the Canadian government, where, for example, they have like equal number of politicians or ministers, where there are like the same number of women and male and female. So that gives the opportunity to people to exist in the same environment, equally. So these are the things that we need to take into account as well. I think we can add one more question, maybe, or maybe not. Okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Personally, I would like to thank you because it's very important to see someone at your age that you are more or less the same age or a bit older than the most people in this room. Okay, and if you believe that Alexandros is lucky enough, I don't think he's only lucky maybe, but he's a hard-working person. So where he is because he deserves to be there. Where I assume that the most of you will have such great opportunities after graduating from the course. I don't know if you want to add something about them, about the course, or something to motivate them, or to encourage.
These are the right words. I think that was my aim for speaking to you guys, and I thank you, Anastasios, for the opportunity, because I honestly asked myself, what would I like to hear if I was in your position? And these are the things, like some of the learnings that I've had from my journey, progressing from university to professional life. And I think also, like, you're in a really good position. Very lucky to be part of a good course, to be in this city already. There's so much stuff going on. I started in a different city, it was in London. There's so many events to be inspired from, to network with people, and I think everything is at your hands. Like, all the opportunities are there for you. The more you try, again, like, the more input you have in your kind of life, the more you'll get out. So keep working hard, and good things will come to you. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.